Right, okay, folks, welcome back. Another day, another week, another podcast. This episode is going to be rather experimental and for a number of different reasons. This week we're discussing something called eidetic imagery. Is that how you pronounce it, Wendy?
It's pretty darn close. Eidetic.
Eidetic.
Mhm.
Eidetic imagery. Okay, I'll introduce my guest first, and then I'll jump into why this is going to be an experimental episode. So my guest today is Wendy Yellen. Wendy is an eidetic life coach with expertise in family and systems therapy and Reichian emotional release bodywork. She's a board member of the Eidetic Imagery Association, a book reviewer for the International Imagery Association, and the author of The Spiritual Manifesto. Wendy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Danny. I'm laughing at the expression on your face, which looks so intriguing. I can't wait to see where we're going to go.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. The reason this is experimental, Wendy, is no offense, but I have done very little research on this. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is mainly because, the way we set these interviews up is, sometimes I reach out to people, sometimes people reach out to me. And on this occasion, it was your people that reached out to me. But I don't know why it is, for some reason, I've got a very low success rate with that. So when people tend to reach out to me, they've got someone they want to come on the podcast, or someone's got a book, they want to come on the podcast, and we book the date, and I send them the link for the Google chat, and I'm like, right, I'm ready, let's go, and then nothing. And so just recently, I've had 3 interviews in a row that have fallen through with that. And so I thought, okay, well, I didn't know if that was going to be the case with us. So I thought I'm going to do a very, very tiny bit of research just in case, because it's no good spending hours swatting up on this stuff and then people don't turn up. But you've turned up.
Yes.
But the other thing is, with this one, so I watched an interview you did with a guy on YouTube, another bearded fellow. I can't remember his name, and his channel's a very sort of spiritual channel, and there seems to be talk about like Buddhism and spirituality. Now the thing is with stuff like that, Wendy, I'm very suspicious of that sort of thing. And my suspicion can sometimes spill over into sort of cynicism or being a bit too dismissive about these things. And so I think it's better for me to come at this completely new. So you're the expert, you're my guest. The whole point of this is for me and my audience to learn from the guests. And so I'm interested, this will be the first ever interview I've done with somebody where I'm coming at this almost with no prior knowledge, just like my audience. So I'm in the same boat as them. And the other reason it's going to be experimental is we're going to be sort of doing a live, well, not live, but we're doing a session of this, of eidetic imagery.
Yes.
Okay, so, right, with all that preamble out of the way.
Yes.
I'm interested to see how this goes myself now.
Me too.
Tell us a little bit about you, please, because so I do know that you have got a bit of an interesting trajectory. Managed to get that word out. I struggle with that word. From your early days working in, I think, with social work and psychology, and then you ditched all that basically to focus on this. But just give us some detail about that, please.
Absolutely. And I want to say I'm delighted to be the breaker of your former experience of people not showing up.
Yes, so. I'm glad you've done that as well. So,
all right. So, and I do want to make a small correction. I'm not a life coach. I'm a eidetic practitioner, transformational acceleration expert, but I don't in any way associate myself as a life coach.
Oh, okay.
And I was just a difference. No worries. So you want to know how I got to what I'm doing? And
well, start with
the
the genesis of your interest in psychology and transformation, trauma, whatever it is, and then how we got to where we are today with this, what I believe seems to be a very niche topic.
Yeah, there's so much to what you said. So let me answer your question first. It really started long, long ago when I was a small child, and my family desperately needed therapy. So they appointed me the family therapist at about 5, probably. So I've been trained, as most therapists are, at my parents' knees of how to, I'm saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, Danny, but also seriously, that is how most therapists start. Something needs healing in the family. And so I was a designated person. It has always interested me, what makes real change? Not how to think differently, but what actually changes the cells in a person? What changes how their face shines or is dull? What changes how we carry ourselves? Not because we straighten up in order to sit better, but because we're feeling that the confidence or the energy or the spring in our step. What makes for those changes? And so I started out as a traditional therapist, as you mentioned, and I got my social work degree, and it's my master's in social work. And then I did extra training in family therapy and Ericksonian hypnotherapy and Neo-Reiki and body work, all kinds of different modalities. And I had a very full practice. In fact, I had a 100% waiting list, referral only, no marketing, private practice, which I had no idea how good that was because it just landed in my lap. So obviously, if your practice is full and people are referring to you, that means that people like what they're getting. My clients obviously appreciated what they were getting enough that they wanted people who they cared about to come to see me. However, I was, of course, also a client because if you're going to, you got to walk your talk. Plus, I wanted to grow and expand. And I was doing all the modalities that I was trained in. I was experiencing those for myself. And I really I could just tell that no matter whether even though I was going in the mental aspect and also in the body work aspect, and I was opening up and lots of things were changing, at some point it felt like, Wendy, if this is all there is, I'm not going to do it anymore. It just wasn't enough. And I'm not the kind of person that can continue doing something just because it's financially successful. It has to feed my soul. So I literally closed my practice and stopped being a therapist for about 5 years. And I remember my sister and my hairdresser really were on my case about it. And they were saying, Wendy, it's in your genes, it's in your soul. How can you not be a therapist? And I said, I just wouldn't do it. And I had a very tough time because the businesses that I went into instead, one, they didn't really float my boat. They didn't really thrill me, whereas therapy did. And I just wasn't successful at them. I was drowning in them, really, but I still wouldn't go back to being a therapist. And then by mistake, air quote mistake, I rediscovered the work we're going to experience today, Eidetics. And at that point, my mind had been opened enough to understand it in a way that I hadn't understood it 20 years before when I first met it. And I did a little studying with the father of Eidetics, Dr. Asen, and I was blown away because despite all the personal work I had done up till that time, I experienced blockages in myself, emotional blockages that were stopping me from success, stopping me from better relationships. And they were in my face and I couldn't ignore them. And I had no idea they were there. All the work I'd done on myself, and it was new to me. So I was like so struck by this. And I thought, this could be the Holy Grail. This could be what I have been hoping existed, but hadn't found yet. So I jumped in with both feet. I did the 3-year training. I flew thousands of miles, I think 4 times a year for 3 years to do the training, and haven't turned back since.
Right. Okay. Let's drill down into a couple of details there. So,
Sure.
so did you have a particular type of therapy that you specialized in? It was your main form, like CBT or behavioral therapy or anything like that?
Okay, so this is back in 1979 to 81 when I went to master's school. So what was really, and I got trained super traditionally. So I was trained in psychodynamic psychotherapy. So that's relationship oriented. It's very deep psychological, nothing behavioral, nothing cognitive. And then I added to that families and systems and Ericksonian hypnotherapy and emotional release body work. So back when I was training, the cognitive behavioral stuff was not nearly as popular as it is now.
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm just interested because you mentioned this sort of disillusionment that you felt with the therapies that you were practicing in. I think actually you wrote on your website there that yeah, I closed my practice completely because I no longer believed in any of the many traditional and non-traditional therapies in which I was certified. So I'm just wondering what if you could sort of give us concrete examples of how that disillusionment came about. Were there any particular experiences with clients, any circumstances that stand out in mind where you were like, yeah, this isn't working. I can't do this anymore?
So it was both with me and with my clients. So it's easier for me to talk about it with myself. I remember it better, but I'll tell you as much as I can about both. So with me, what I remember feeling in the different therapies was it was too superficial. The changes were too superficial. I'm smart. So something that was that I could do with my head wasn't good for me because I was already in my head. I wanted to go deeper than that, if that makes any sense to you. And also, I I could feel that it was. I was hoping there was something better than changing how you think, because I could feel for myself that when I was wanting to make a change, just changing how I thought didn't even cut it for the deep stuff. That's one. And then with my clients, I mean, so you can imagine I'm sitting with people, they're really happy. I did marriage therapy. I did individual therapy for a little while. I worked with kids when I was in training. And so people are feeling better. Their relationships are better. But I'm not bored, but I can see we're on a certain level and I know there's more depth and I can't get to it even with all these different modalities. And I was good at them and they're good modalities. So it was like that it's change, but not enough change. I want the change. I'd hoped that this was possible. Now I know it is. I wanted the change to kind of bubble up from a person. I wanted for someone to be able to be doing something, not because they're forcing themselves or not because they think it's a good idea, but because it bubbles up from their deepest self and they just find themselves doing it. And it shows on their face and in their body and in their eyes and in their eye contact and in their natural confidence. That's what I wanted for people and lots more. So that wasn't happening. It was happening, but it just wasn't enough. Does that make sense or
Yeah,
not?
it does. What were if you don't mind me asking,
Mm.
what were the things personally that you were trying to tend to that
Mhm.
say psychodynamic therapy? I mean, when you say that these modalities weren't working for you personally as well, so are these were you coming at these from a sort of a self-help perspective, like I know all this stuff and I'm trying to apply it to myself, or were you under the care of a therapist yourself?
Oh, definitely a therapist. You can't, what you can do for yourself and what somebody else can do for you are universes apart.
Okay, so what, like I say, as long as you don't mind me asking, what are the things that you were trying to tend to figure out
Yes,
um
sure.
what were the origins of it or whatever, and what aspects of it were, say, psychodynamic therapy missing? Why wasn't that enough for your particular issues?
So remember that I was doing all the different modalities that I was learning, or had been certified in. So that and I'm about to answer your question, but you need to hear this part first. So I had the psychodynamic psychotherapy. Then I also had family therapies that I was studying, certified in, and undergoing. And then also emotional release body work. So I was coming at all different parts of the self. What was I working on? I'm going back in time. So what I remember was that I was all in my head. That's one thing. So again, I was good with my brain. And so if you would ask me, well, Wendy, how do you feel about that? My answer would always be, well, I think, because I didn't actually know what I felt. So I had no access to it. Now that seemed really important to me, to be able to actually feel something. What I did feel, what I was aware of feeling, was irritation and aggravation way too much of the time, and impatience. A lot of impatience. And when I was impatient, so that would mean I'd rush in my thinking when I'm in a relationship with someone or talking to someone. I would be ahead of the conversation. I would get irritated at people. Not all the time. I mean, I wasn't miserable to be with, but these were some of the things that were going on inside me.
What was the rush when you're talking about like irritation and impatience? What were you striving for? What was the sort of the origin of it?
The origin in terms of my psyche?
Yeah, what was it you was impatient with? And when you're rushing, what was you rushing for?
Not the rushing like people have now. It was more of an impatience with life, an impatience with other people, like, hurry up and get it. I would always I'd always have the answer really quickly to things, and I wasn't patient about waiting for other people. I'm trying really hard to remember, because this feels like another lifetime. So in my relationship with my husband, who I've known since 1978, and we've been together all that time. So this is where it showed up big time. So I would be critical of him with impatience. Judgment and criticism come with impatience often, and they did with me. So I would be judgmental of myself, judgmental of him. And you can't have a loving relationship when, even if I wasn't expressing it, it was in my head. So I was in my head judging him as less than, or of course I'm right. Even if it was just in my head, like, you can't have a good relationship like that. And I knew that, but I didn't know what to do with it. I understood it. I knew where it came from. I could see, I could see it between my parents. I could see it in my mother. I had all of that, but that didn't change it.
Okay, and so when we get to the eidetic imagery, what I think we need to explain what it is now. Give it a brief summary of what it is, and then why you found it attractive and something you wanted to get into.
Okay, so I'll give the brief explanation, which when we do the experience, it's going to make so much more sense. It's very hard to understand this work without the experience, which is why you and I are going to do it. And the brief explanation is an eidetic image is an image that is in the mind, and it has a visual component and a sensation or emotional components, and layers of meanings. Now, let me take it to the next level from that. So an eidetic image is formed at difficult times, maybe a trauma, or repeated difficult times. Let's say the dinner table when we're growing up, for example. It's also formed during beautifully positive, wonderful times. And all of us are walking around with thousands of them inside. They capture, this is a really interesting part for me, they capture the problem that the person is currently experiencing. They contain all the elements of the difficulty that we're experiencing in the area we want to change in. But beautifully, they also have the solution inside them. And the way they have that is eidetic images don't come from memory or history, even though it sounds like it. They're actually coming from a different part of the mind. And they contain the parts of us that were there before history crusted us over and crusted over some of our resources and potentials. Because basically, we all come in with a lot more of ourselves than we end up having later on, because the family, society, religion, culture, school, it all presses in on us to make us be a certain way. Like your culture is what, Danny? What's your culture? How you grew up? Is it, it's not, I hate to say it. I know it's from the UK, but Irish?
No, it's I'd say it's either. I mean, it's difficult to make a distinction really between English and British, but I'd say it was sort of English white working class, sort of rooted in Judeo-Christian values, I guess.
Okay, so no Irish or Scottish in there?
Not for me personally, no.
Huh, okay. Okay. So if someone, let's say someone grows up in England, someone grows up in Kenya, and someone grows up in Japan, they're going to have very different forces on them. Mm-hmm. Where somebody grows up Catholic, somebody grows up Jewish, somebody grows up Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim. It's very different pressures from the culture or the society, the religion or the school. And the family is really big in that. So that kind of takes the square peg, shaves off the corners and fits it into the round hole. But the person still came in with different abilities and resources. And the eidetics help us get back to them. Now, that doesn't make any sense until we experience it, but that's what an eidetic image is.
Right. So I just want to just be very sort of specific about this, because it seems tricky to me to make a distinction between, whether an eidetic image is a sort of a scientifically recognized distinct phenomena, mm-hmm. or whether it's just a semantic play on a general phenomena. So I mean, what is the difference between an eidetic image and mm-hmm. say an imaginary image, the sort of a visual projection that I can generate right now of anything you say, and then an image of a particular memory. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's go with those three. You've got an imaginative image, and an image generated by a particular memory, and then an eidetic image. I'll go through all three of those, but all three of those. Let me address what you said before. So this is not a term I made up. It isn't even a term that my mentor and teacher, the father of eidetics, made up. First of all, it goes back to ancient Greece. Okay. The ancient Greece, the word eidetics comes from eidos, which is ancient Greek. And it has to do with an image formed in the mind. Now, they didn't use it as therapy, but they understood the power of it so strongly that they called eidetic images gifts from the gods. So we're talking, quite a long time ago. And then I think it was the 1800s that the Marburg School in Germany started researching eidetic images. And then particularly then Dr. Asen took it into the therapeutic realm. There are dozens and dozens and dozens, like a couple decades worth of journals about the Journal of Mental Imagery. It doesn't exist at this point. So where people, very well renowned psychologists of the late 20th century, Bandura and Karl Pribram, who are
who are devoted to their own fields and whose books were some of the main books that people studied psychology from, who supported Eidetics so much they were on the board of the journal. So this is not something that somebody pulled out of the hat. This is something that's deeply rooted in well-researched psychology. It's just not very well known, but that doesn't mean that it's not researched. So I wanted you to hear that first.
Yeah,
okay?
and then I'm particularly interested in the
three.
Yeah, but it can be tricky. I did a conversation with a guy called Eric Schwitzgable. I can't remember which university, but we were talking about the sort of the phenomenology of present moment awareness and how difficult it is to actually describe the conscious experience. And so, I mean, I don't know how helpful this is. But for me, I think there's a language barrier there, a linguistic barrier to these sort of descriptions. But I'd say, for me anyway, when we're talking about an imagined image, for me, that sort of there's an interesting thing going on here for people visually as well. When I'm talking about an imagined image, I'm looking up to the right, and a memory for some reason is bringing me down to the left here. But it's the images are placed differently, sort of in space and time, I guess. There's a sort of an amorphous nature to an imagined image. It seems to shift before your very eyes, and there's an involuntary aspect to it. Whereas with a memory, it feels a lot more concrete, a lot more colourful. It sort of plays out by itself. And I'd argue that the memories are layered with meaning as well. And so I'm interested in where the eidetic image falls amongst or in between those from a phenomenological perspective. What's the description of it that makes it distinct from those two?
It's a great question, because it really speaks to why eidetics can be so powerful compared to a fantasy image or a memory, because it is completely different. So I'll do my best, Danny, but keep asking if I'm not getting there. So let's take a guided visualization, like a fantasy, like see yourself on a beautiful ocean, beach with the ocean waves lapping, something like that. So when a person does that, they're starting with an image. They may even be starting with a state of mind that they want to accomplish. For example, Olympic athletes use visualization to see themselves running the race, for example, right? And they really are training their muscles like that. So there's an intention first, or just a desire to maybe relax if it's a beach image. And a fantasy is coming from that place. It starts with a desire of how you want to feel, or somebody's telling you to see something. So you're starting with what someone else is telling you to see, and you're supposed to see it with certain aspects, like the ocean, and you hear the waves, and you feel the hot, warm sand beneath your toes.
Okay,
right?
so there are predetermined constraints on it, and there is a goal in mind.
Okay. And the goal in mind is very specific, and that is to feel a certain way.
Okay.
Right? Let's forget about the Olympics, because that's slightly different. That's a visualization, and people use that. That's not eidetics. Now, memory. Okay, this is, I think, the really juicy part of the question. So memory, the part of our mind that remembers, does it, in my opinion, to shortcut things. So, for example, if you have a painful memory, if anyone has a painful memory, maybe a painful breakup or somebody's death. So the mind remembers those things and can, I say, regurgitate the details over and over and over, and we start to perseverate in our head. We can, if it's a really difficult thing. For example, why did I say that thing to that person that got me into so much trouble? And then we rehearse over and over what we did and what we wish we had done. And we're seeing, or we're going back to the memory. That's the same thing that already happened, maybe wishing it was different, but going over and over and over it. To my mind, that does not contain the seeds of resolution. It is a part of the mind that's taking us back to something, and it's repeating it. We can think about the memory, like, what could I have done differently? Or I wish I had said this to them before they died, kind of thing. But it's still a memory. It doesn't have a life of its own. It is something that happened and it finished. Let's say there's an abuse. It happened, it's finished. Maybe you want to think about it differently. Maybe people talk about forgiving. This is not how I talk about it, but people talk about forgiving, but it's done. And if people see it as a finished product, it affected us, and now we can maybe try to change that, but it's over. Do you agree with me so far or not?
I'm not sure. I think, you see, I'd argue that, like you said, that the purpose of memory is to be able to, I'd guess from an evolutionary perspective, the purpose of a memory is to be able to successfully navigate the future. And when I say successfully, I mean from a Darwinian perspective, it's that, giving yourself the best possible chance of survival. And I think when you've got, say we've got getting attacked by a bear. A bear jumps out of a cave and attacks you. We've used the bear cave analogy a lot on this podcast.
Okay.
Might end up being my logo. But so the bear comes out of the cave and it attacks you, and there's the meaning there is it's inherent in the experience, and it becomes you extrapolate in a sort of Platonian ideal sense the lesson from it. So that would be why next time you go near a cave, you'd get that, you would avoid the cave in general, even though there might not be a bear in every cave, but it's just safer from an evolutionary perspective to avoid. Now caves are bad, stay away from caves. And then that helps you moving forward into the future. And the answer is inherent with it. But it's such a such a simple experience at that level. You nearly died. Don't go near the cave again.
Yes.
But with the complex sort of social dynamics that human beings are involved in, and the fact that human beings are also capable of cognition and metacognition, attributing meaning to their own thinking and attributing certain motives and thoughts to other people, that makes the experiences that we have, the interactions we have, a lot more complex.
Yes.
But I still think that there's a very basic evolutionary sort of lesson to be learned in every sort of traumatic experience.
Sure.
And the answer is there in the memory if it can be sort of extrapolated from it. And the reason that we struggle with that extrapolation is our own involvement in it. If we were like, we were like the animals, we weren't self-conscious, we wouldn't have those issues in the first place. And I think the reason that we have these memories and sort of play them over and over is there is an answer to be gleaned from it. And I think when you think of really troubling experiences, rape, things like soldiers getting trauma from combat and the like, there seems to be a lot of success for those people when they do take those same memories that have been bothering them for years, and if they, engage with a therapist, say, or just anybody that can sort of listen to them compassionately and help them think about these things in a different way. Once they extract the meaning from that situation, and learn what feels like a valuable lesson from it that can then help them moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's where, even though memories play over, there's a purpose to them, and I would argue that the answer is usually contained within the memories if we can just slightly shift the perspective.
I would agree with you completely. However, the shift that you would make, that you're talking about, and the shift that I would make in the memory would be very different.
What do you mean by that?
So we work with memories all the time, but you see, what I'm really talking about here is for me and people like me who have gone to a certain point intellectually with things and appreciate that point, but feel a hunger for something different. That's where I was when I first started. That's where my clients are. Those are the people that come to me. I've had so many people say to me, my head runs the show. I'm having a struggle between my head and my heart. And I can see that where I'm going with my head is not taking me where I want to go. That's the level I'm talking about. That's the level that I work with. So to use your example, absolutely, there's great value in memory. For me, it's not about trying to think about the memory or trying to understand the memory. I want to go to a different place with that. And let me think of an example of a memory with a client. Okay, so I had a client whose father was in a wheelchair because of a degenerative disease. So most of the time my client was growing up, his father couldn't play tennis, couldn't do anything physical with them, and was weak. And so he was seeing a physically weak but kind father through his young eyes. And that's who he grew up with. So he grew up with a sensation, a feeling of not just his father's weakness, but vulnerability and not standing up, literally not standing up, but I meant emotionally not standing up. This is the father he had when he met me in his memory. And that memory was correct. That is what he saw. However, in working with the memories eidetically, what came through and is the part of his father that was there before the degenerative disease, the part of his father that had more life and energy and was able to give to his son more. And as that father emerged, who was also real, it's just that this client had never experienced his father that way, but it was in his mind. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. As he began to experience that father more, his own connection to himself, to his father, to his own confidence, to his own having agency in the world, all of that started to grow. So that was really important for him.
Okay, so I mean, the thing that I'm maybe picking up on there is the distinction then, one of the distinctions between a sort of a pure memory and an eidetic image is a difference between, maybe the difference exists at a level of symbolism. There's a symbolic difference. So with the memory of the father is the I mean, I've got this from my own experience. My dad was died last year of a degenerative muscle disease, and when I spoke at his funeral, I remember making the point to people that I know that what you all remember of my dad is this sort of crippled, weak man in a wheelchair that couldn't do anything. And, to me, my dad was this Leviathan figure that no matter what happened to him physically, symbolically, what he represented to me was this sort of this giant figure.
Yes.
So is that sort of what we're talking about when you mention
No.
that there? We've got the memory of the weak, sort of disabled father, but then the eidetic image of the father is that the father, even if he doesn't, he isn't something physically, materially, he still represents something significant symbolically or emotionally, even.
No. Sorry, Danny. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because symbolism. All right, let me backtrack a bit. What our minds want to do, in my experience, is to think about things, to solve things with the mind. That includes metaphor and symbolism. So when my clients see an image that brings them to tears because it's touching a core place in them, it came from them, it's moving them to tears because they're actually, let's say, feeling the love of their mother who died when they were a child, but they're feeling it, actually experiencing it as they're looking at an image. They're not just remembering, they're not wishing, they're actually experiencing it. It's not a symbol to them. It's a visceral experience that's happening because of what they're seeing that came from deep inside them. When you see a symbol, you have a strong symbol of your father as Leviathan, and that is serving you. And it's a very different image than the people that you were talking to. That feels true to me, right? Mm-hmm. The people that were at the funeral. You have something else inside of you. I would argue that perhaps the symbol of him is actually more than what most people would call a symbol, that it's a felt, visceral place inside of you that experiences him, not as a symbol, but experiences him as Leviathan.
So it's now, so an emotional level then. It's an emotive memory.
Yes, if it were an eidetic, it would be different, but I'm suggesting, and it looks like you agree, sounds like you agree, that like a symbol sometimes has no emotional component. It just is. Like the symbol, whatever symbol is on your coins, right? It's just a symbol, a head of some king or something, right? So, but your Leviathan father has, even as you're describing it, I can feel it emanates an energy from you. There's an emotional component of it that I could feel as you were talking about it. So that says to me that it's more than a symbol to you, that he is that. Not just that he symbolizes something big that'll protect you, but he is that for you. And that's more than a mental symbol.
Right, okay. That's fine, but I'm still...
You'll never get this. I'm gonna interject. You'll never get this from your head. It'll never happen. That's the whole reason that I go on podcasts to do experience it, because no matter how much people try to figure this out with their head, and believe me, I tried just like you are, and I never got it until I got the experience of it. And you still may not. You still may not. I can't guarantee anything that's going to happen today, but I will guarantee anything that'll happen. But I can guarantee you can never understand eidetics from the head. It will not happen because it's not a head thing.
Okay,
and that's hard. That's hard when we're smart, like you are.
Well, it is because obviously the origin of the images that are going to arise in the imagination are quite literally taking place within the head at a cognitive level. So
no, sorry. I need time. Okay.
I sort of feel compelled to add here that because Wendy sort of timed out very quickly. The reason she's timed out is because she's doing a cleanse at the moment, and so she needs frequent bathroom breaks, not because I said something offensive. and she needed a break from me because I'm doing her heading. I don't. Maybe it is that. Maybe I am doing her heading, but just trying to drill down into the specifics. That's all.
I'm back.
Right. Okay. Well, you left us on a very interesting disagreement there, Wendy, because you said that I said that obviously these not these memories, this eidetic imagery is going to take place within the mind, and you said no.
Well, you said the mind, the cognitive mind. After which I said no.
Oh, okay, fair enough. That's a fair distinction. Okay, we are going to jump into this in a minute. The reason I'm trying to drill down into a decent definition of it is, I think when it comes to these newer concepts, niche concepts or whatever that seem to have any sort of spiritual component to them,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that a lot of these practices are guilty of using purposefully ambiguous language and concepts that are hard to pin down, because it makes them unfalsifiable, I guess. That's my big criticism of Freud, for instance, is the unfalsifiability of it. That was Karl Popper's criticism of Freud, and I happen to agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just from the listener perspective, I think it's good to sort of drill down and get the definitions.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I do know is, even though I asked you as the interviewer before whether this was recognised as a distinct phenomena, I happen to already know that it has been recognised as a distinct phenomena in the literature.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being the case, I would have thought that it was, at least to a certain degree, describable, because if it's recognised in the literature as being a specific phenomena, someone is going to have written this down and described it as such. And
yes.
So,
yes, it's very, very describable, and it is so thick and hard to understand that I'm doing my very best to bring it down to something understandable. So I'm going to read to you how Dr. Asen, just to give you an idea. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. I wasn't planning on doing this, so I'm just going to.
Well, I wasn't planning on doing any of the conversation that we've had so far, and it seems to be going pretty well. So
I hope it's of use to your listeners. So I'm just going to read to you. My sense is I should read the definition from the beginning of this book, Psych-Eye. And all right, I'm just picking a page. The idea that the process of seeing in some way represents an act of understanding is central to the concentration theory, which treats the functions of the eye as a miniature brain mechanism within the larger brain. This little brain, the watching eye, organizes the activity of the larger brain. For instance, examine the German word, I don't speak German, but something like Einfühlung, meaning to feel within, which refers to the ability in a person to know what another person is experiencing through the latter's eyes. Plotinus said that the eye would not be able to, well, actually, that's not going to help you all. Hang on, let me give you one more place. The central question in psychological literature concerns the true nature of our mental being. Studies have attempted to establish whether what the mind knows is merely learned, or whether the mind is creative and free in nature, and whether we think in abstract words or in living pictures. Experimentalists in mnemonics and imaginary processes such as Betz, Vygotsky, Pavio, Yule, and Sheehan have progressively emphasized that mind is, in fact, more free than controlled and dependent on imagery processes. So that's 3 sentences. I think that's too dense to be able to use in a podcast or even meaningfully with most people. So I'm doing my best to try to take the extremely dense language that explains this work. There are 30 books And every page, every sentence is underlinable. They're thick with meanings. I mean, that's just beginning and showing you. So I'm doing my best to bring it down to something that people won't fall asleep about and make it meaningful.
Well, I'm a stickler for detail, you see, Wendy, and so I think by now this podcast is nearly 3 years old. Anyone that's bored of detail would have left by now. So
okay. I'm a more big picture person, so excuse me for not being able to totally connect on all the ways that you asked me to. I'm doing my best.
No, it's fine. I think we're going to jump into doing the experience in a minute, because that might, I think me describing the experience retrospectively might add to the sort of the phenomenological description of it as an experience. Mm-hmm. But just for those that are familiar with these sort of definitions, the different schools of thought, one very simple definition, or not what an eidetic image is, but of how this school of thought functions, is so this is from the main eidetic website, which was, I think, about the professor that you mentioned, the person that you studied under,
Dr. Asen.
Yes. It says the thrust of the imagery movement is that the image is most central to human activity and expression, much as behaviorists believe that behavior is central. So, with Freud, it was the unconscious, the behaviorists, the cognitive movement. These are all these schools of thought where what's the gravitational center of the human psychological experience? Mm-hmm. It's cognitions, it's behavior, it's it's sex or whatever with Freud, and so with the imagery movement, it's this idea of images and the meaning of those that are central to the psychological experience. So, okay,
yes, thank you for that. That was good.
Let's jump into this now. So,
okay, all right.
I've turned up at your office. I'm all messed up in the head about something. And that's a fact. I'm sure I could pluck something out. I've got plenty of problems. And let's see how this goes.
Okay, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, though, Danny. Not you coming to an office. I want to give you and all your listeners just a plain experience of eidetics, not to try to fix something, because that's a setup, although something may shift. So let me dive deeper into that.
Well, sorry, Wendy. What I
mean. Let me explain what I mean. I think it's going to address what I think you're about to say. So there are a couple things that could happen in what we're about to do. First, as we go into the image and into the feelings, if you can stay out of your head and out of the thinking process, and I'll do my best to help you with that, you and your listeners separately may experience a visceral knowing of some part of life that's getting blocked right now, like a real and visceral experience of the way you're your own worst enemy.
Okay, good choice of words.
Okay. And some of your listeners, perhaps you, I don't know, because you're using your intellect a lot, and that's going to be part of what we'll have to work with. Some people may experience a breakthrough in an area that's important to them. I'm not guaranteeing that, and I'm actually not going to try for that with you, Danny. Let's just see if we can get you actually into doing an actual eidetic image as opposed to a memory. If there's room and space and you want to go further, you and I will. That's going to be up to you.
Yeah, no, that's
right.
See, the only thing I'd say, Wendy, is that I'm quite happy to go for like a genuine experience to address something that's actually bothering me. I am totally on board that it's completely unreasonable to expect anything. To have some big aha moment. I think to be honest, I think that's
It's a setup. But
Yeah, more often than not, it's not a genuine experience that people
yes.
have in the real world anyway. I remember having a few aha moments along the way when I was doing therapy, but as for this idea of this big insight that happens all of a sudden and then whoa, all my problems are gone. No.
All right. No.
I mean, I don't know of that being a realistic experience either for me or for anybody else that I've interacted with, communicated with, even any of the professors and therapists that I've worked with the entire time on this podcast. So I think that's an unreasonable expectation. What I don't think is an unreasonable expectation is to have a smaller aha moment, not necessarily of maybe addressing any problem that we happen to be discussing, but an aha moment of what the experience itself entails. So, for instance, with me, I did cognitive behavioral therapy with a couple of therapists, and then I moved on to doing something called metacognitive therapy. And it was a few sessions before I actually got my head around what a metacognition was and how that related to my experience. And then once that dropped into place, there was then a shift took place. It wasn't an emotional shift that helped me with my problems, but it was a conceptual shift that helped me with the therapeutic process itself and sort of understanding my own thoughts moving forward. I don't think that would be an unreasonable expectation, particularly with this being such a sort of a new approach, at least as far as me and a lot of my listeners are going to be concerned. So I'm interested to see where this goes.
Okay, number one, we're going to work in a real way with real stuff. Okay. So if I seem to be saying differently, I'm not. This is for real. Number two, at least for my clients, and I would hope even right here today with you and your listeners, I am going for way more than aha.
Okay.
If it's only aha, then it's just scratching the surface of what can happen. No pressure. I just want that for me, an aha at this point of my work, my personal work and my work with my clients, I don't want an aha. I don't want to get it in my head. Now, your listeners, though, that may be different for them. So let's just see what happens.
Okay.
Okay? Yep. All right. So first of all, since this is a real thing, for you and everyone listening, I'm going to walk Danny through this. But please do, if you want to have the experience for yourself, do it as I'm doing with Danny. And I'll show you at the end a way to have it be more specific to you. So Danny, would you tell us something that you would like to experience a shift in your life?
Okay, so people listening to this, watching this, the last episode I will have discussed with Paul Gilbert on compassion-focused therapy, and what we talked about there was my issue with how hard I am on myself about this idea of success and the shame of previous failures. So the shame of previous failures and feeling that some sort of success in the future would be a redemption of that, and the struggle towards that. That's been a constant for many years now.
Okay. You're hard on yourself about success. You go back to the shame of previous failures. That's what comes up in your mind. And then you think that this new success would be a redemption of those old ones. Mm-hmm. But then what does your mind do with that? Once you start, then what happens? What's actually happening about actions or ways that you're moving towards success? What happens when you move towards it or try to?
There's a lot of frustration and impatience involved in it. Things aren't moving quick enough. Not enough things are going right. There's too many failures for every success. When success happens, it's not a celebratory feeling. It's a feeling of, at best, it's a feeling of relief. Like, oh, we're there finally. On to the next bit. And at worst, it's just another chance to look up at the horizon and realize how far away the ultimate goal still remains.
Okay. So you're moving in these directions, but what happens is there are, it's not quick, it's not easy. There are failures along the way, too many failures. And then if you do get to some piece of success, it's been a kind of, this is my word, like a kind of drudgery. It's like, oh, I finally got there. Let me move on to the next thing.
Yep.
There's even no good feeling about it. And it doesn't feel like it's building to the thing that you actually want. It's more like drudgery. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in that case, I'm going to do an image that I don't usually do on a podcast, but it seems like a really good image for you.
And let me just add, Wendy, I don't know if this would be relevant. The main driver for me now with this wanting to achieve success, when I was younger, it was the same old, you want to be sort of big pimping by the time you're 30 and, hanging out on a yacht with a load of strippers or whatever. Whereas, in my late 30s now, I'm getting on to 40 soon. I've got a little boy, well, and a little girl, but my little boy is, he's 8 years old now. God, saying that out loud. And he's 9 next in September. And that's a bit of a race, is the race against time going on there for me, because the main driver for me now is, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, is it doesn't feel genuine to me to tell my little boy or my little girl as she gets a bit older that they can be whatever they want to be in life when I didn't do it, because that just seems like the logical reaction. You say to somebody, you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want in life. Well, then he'd be totally in the right to turn around and say, well, why didn't you achieve anything then? And so there's two aspects of it there. I don't want to be a failure in my son's eyes, but I also want to be proof to him that that you can make something of yourself and not be a negative influence. That's the main driver for me.
Whoa, I feel that one.
Yeah, more than money or any of that nonsense. So.
Okay. Well, we'll do a few things then. Let's dig in here. So everybody else has their whatever they're working on, and a couple suggestions about how we're going to proceed, so that, and I'll repeat these as needed. This is for you and everybody listening. So number one, I'm going to be using some images that have parents in them, but I want to remind or really underline that even though it has parents in them, these images are not about history and they're not about memory. What we're actually doing is we're looking at your deeper consciousness. We're looking at the ways that you're being your own worst enemy, that are coming from deep inside, from ways that you were taught, that are not necessarily your full self. So the reason I'm saying this is that we're not trying to get you to remember something. We're not trying to get you to see a memory. And even though I'm going to be using the word parents, it's not about your parents. This is all about what's going on inside you, period. Now, it may resemble parents, but the important piece is it's about you. Because right now, you're almost 40. You're getting there, right? Your parents aren't in this podcast with us. It's you. Okay. And that's who we're working with. That's number one. Number two is, as I told you, the ancient Greeks called these images gifts from the gods. So when you have a gift from the god, you don't tell it what to do. You let it show you what it wants to show you. So there may be an impetus or a desire to try to control the image, make it go a certain way, try to feel a certain way. And I will help you not do that. Okay. Because you really want it to be like a champion racehorse. Let it run. Free rein. Okay?
Okay.
And I'll remind you. All right. Now you can do this for the listener. If you're driving, this is not a great, please don't do this while you're driving. You won't get nearly as much out of it and it could be dangerous. But for you, Danny, you can do it with your eyes open or closed. And I'm going to do one of the success images with you, actually, which is a little bit different, like I said, than I normally do. But it's a good one. So, with your eyes open or closed, see your parents running in the open countryside from a time when you're growing up. Don't decide how they would run. Don't decide how old you are. Don't even decide the countryside. Just let your mind hear the instruction and wait till an image forms. See your parents running in the open countryside from a time when you're growing up. You don't have to make it vivid. Just let yourself see whatever you see. And when you do see something, notice how they're running. What's the energy? What is the pace? Who's running faster? How do they seem running? Now, in the beginning, it took me a really long time to see anything. So, Danny, you just, when you see something, even again, if you've never seen them run in your life, it doesn't matter. This is an eidetic image. So share, when you're ready, share with us what you are seeing.
I don't know why this is. I'm seeing my dad. My mum's not coming up. I'm trying. I mean,
don't force it. Let's just see that.
Okay. Well, then to just describe it purely as your instruction was,
yes.
My mum wasn't coming up at all. I'm seeing my dad. He's younger. He's healthy. He's smiling. He's as I remember him when I was very young, like about 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. But even though you were saying picture your parents, I mean, I love your mum. My mum's still here. See my mum every day, but she wasn't just she was only in the image, like when you said then, when I'm trying to crowbar her into it. But no crowbars. You're doing great. Okay, so you're seeing him running, and for those of people who are watching the video, you can see how much you were smiling when you were seeing him. Could you feel that? That was like, what would you say is there? Just don't go into your head, Danny. Just keep looking at the image. See your dad running. You said he's younger, he's healthy, he's smiling. Mm-hmm. Tell us more, like what you're seeing first, and then what you're experiencing. Okay, well, for some reason, he's on. There's a field just down the road from here that we used to go taking the dogs for a walk on, and he's on that. That's where he is, and it's the daytime. It's sunny. It's like a cheesy. It's almost like a tampon advert where the sun's over there in the horizon, and it's sort of it's there over his shoulder, and he's sort of a misty vision of him.
Yes. And how old? You said you're somewhere between 5 and 8, given how he looks. Yeah. Can you feel your young self looking at him? Can you feel how old your young self is? No. Okay, that's
disembodied.
All right. What was that?
It's a disembodied image. That's what I remember of him, but I'm not really there.
Okay, but you are looking. Okay, so now, could you describe how you're feeling as you see your image? Just keep looking at it and notice what's happening in your sensations or emotions as you see him like this.
It's just it's bittersweet, I guess, because I'm seeing a guy that was once, physically strong and agile and young.
I'm going to interject. because you're going into something that's not in the image. So, which is correct, but what I want you to do is see the image and tell me what you feel when you just see the image, this gift. Because this is what your consciousness showed you. I didn't tell you just see Dad young. When you only let yourself see what your image is showing you and you let yourself be affected by it, that's if you can let yourself be, and you already were, but now I'm pushing you on it, so it's a little harder. What do you feel when you see this Dad?
No, it's
this father.
Yeah, no, it's still the same, Wendy. It's a nice image to see, but
Yes.
it's bittersweet because I know the destiny of that person in the image.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you about this. So this is, everybody has a situation where something was positive and then something bad happened later.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a parent died. In your case, your father got sick and then died.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know the other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah.
Okay. So our mind tells us, well, this is nice, but it's not going to last.
Yes. For everything.
Yeah. So you're laughing heartily. So tell us more about how that struck you.
Well, I see myself in that statement, in that the concept of waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's me.
Yeah. Would you say that, does that come in with the whole success thing that we're working with here? The other shoe will drop. Something good might happen, but then something else is going to go wrong, and the heck with it, or whatever.
Yeah, not so much that I think something good's going to happen and then get taken away. Mm-hmm. Just that I've had my chance, and I'm stuck now. It's not going to happen again.
Okay. All right. So you may not. So my comment here, and take it as much as you can, is that in Eidetics, what we would work with here is how, I'm going to keep using the name of your podcast, how you're being your own worst enemy here. Mm-hmm. Because if you really do think of these as gifts, and at this point, I really do, everyone who's looking at the video can see how much pleasure there was in your face when you first saw your father. It was beautiful to see you, actually. Mm-hmm. I hope you'll go back and look. And then but the truth is, it didn't last. So the quote unquote truth of what happened later covers up the ability to have pleasure. It becomes bittersweet. Mm-hmm. But the real pleasure that was in you was true and real. And the real connection to your father, the real enjoyment of seeing him this way, we could see it. So another part of your mind is coming in and saying, but whoa, wait, we can't feel that too much because bad things happen later, and we all know this. So I just want you to hear that, because that's part of the work. If we were working, that's part of what we would work with, because you're interfering with your ability to have that feeling. Your mind is saying, nope, that didn't last. Nope, we can't go there. We can't stay there because it isn't real. But it was real, and we all saw it. So just take that in for a second.
Okay, so are we saying then that the experience should be one of pure observation without reflection?
No. I'm simply showing you how your mind is stopping you from feeling differently.
Okay. And
I'm not looking for a pure positive. What I'm looking for is for you to experience what your consciousness is showing you about yourself. Okay. But we're going to set this aside for a second, because now, a totally different image. Now see your parents running in the open countryside for the purpose of making money from a time when you're growing up. Now, don't think, just let your mind hear it. I'm going to say it again, and notice what image shows up. See your parents running in the open countryside for the purpose of making money from a time when you're growing up. Wait, allow the image to show. When you see it, notice this time, whoever's showing up, what do they look like? How are they running? Are they running together, separately? What's the speed? What's the energy? How do you feel when you see the image? And I'll run you through more of those questions. So when you see it, Danny, tell us.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see? And keep looking as you're seeing it.
Okay, it's the same location. For some reason, my mum's managed to pop up in this one.
Okay.
I don't know if that's got anything to do with the money aspect of it. It's my mum from about 1988, when she had short hair, like dyed blonde hair that with a weird fringe. Remember those 80s hairdos? I don't know how to
Yes.
describe the hairdo, but it's Linda Whitaker circa 1988. And she's slimmer. Sorry, mum. Yeah, she's wearing some dress that I remember seeing her in some photographs, and they're just sort of I don't know, they're jogging along through through the field, and yeah, I don't know, it's a very sort of it's a very simple image.
Yes.
There's not much. It's not as vibrant as the other one.
Is it literally less vibrant in terms of visually, or just that less is happening? Or both?
Both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So who is running faster, if someone is?
No, they're both running at the same speed.
What's the energy between them?
The same as it was all the time. They were
Stay with what you're seeing. Tell us what you're seeing in the image. Remember, we're not dealing with history. We're dealing with your consciousness. So you really want to see what you see.
Yeah, it's just my mum and dad. They were just two peas in a pod, and that's how they look.
Okay. And when you see them looking like that, two peas in a pod, running, jogging, how do you feel?
Yeah, it's nice. There's I guess fondness is the emotion I'd ascribe to this particular image. Yeah, fondness.
Okay. All right. And do they seem to have the purpose of making money? Does that seem to be the purpose of why they're running?
No.
Ask them in the image, are they running for the purpose of making money or not? And see what they say.
No.
Can you ask them why? No, wait a minute. I'm not sure I want you to do that. Okay. Now, neither of them has a purpose, right?
No.
Of making money. Not either one.
Nope.
Okay. Now, let this image go. And now see that your parents are running in the open countryside because money is needed for the family. Just let your mind hear the words and see what shows up. Remember, we're not looking at your parents, we're looking at you. Money, don't figure it out, right? Don't try to plant what you think you should see. They're running because money is needed for the family, and notice what you see.
Very clear this.
Yeah.
This is my dad running, picking up the pace and running ahead, and my mother, hanging back and leaving it up to him and sort of giving him her blessing.
Okay. Yeah. Now, does he offer to help her?
Yeah.
And does she accept the help?
Yeah.
But show us what you see.
It's just you the moment you change the motivation.
Yes.
he was off like a fucking greyhound.
Yes, yes, a fucking greyhound. Okay.
Yeah, dutiful. That's my dad.
Is it dutiful in a grim way or
No.
a different kind of dutiful? Just what?
No, it's
Okay.
yeah, it just has to be done. It's got to be done, and yeah.
But is that in a harsh or kind of repressed way? No.
No.
Okay. All right. Now, do your very best with this, Danny, because this will really help you if you can do it. Notice how you feel seeing your dad running this way.
Yeah, proud of him.
Okay, that's definitely a feeling. Now see if you can notice how it affects you in terms of yourself, how your own body feels seeing the way he's running. Proud is good, but I want to see if you can get it more personally about you. Your own sensations, your own emotions. Or even how proud of your dad feels to you. That would be another way.
It's I know this isn't a distinct emotion, but the emotional experience of it is that my dad was the one that carried the family.
Yes.
You know, he was, and seeing that, it was just, that's what my dad did. He did what needed to be done, and he's doing that there, and there's a feeling of safety and security because shit needs to be taken care of. My dad took care of it, and that's that's sort of whatever that emotion is.
That's great. That's great. Safety and security. Mm-hmm. He's going to get it done. There's a certainty also, right? Like he's got this.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
It's a dead given. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. And notice how that feels in you. Just keep looking at him doing this and notice how that affects your body, because I can see it.
Yeah, like I say, it's a very it's a secure feeling. It's almost a predetermined outcome to it.
Yeah,
it's going to get dealt with. So
excellent. Okay, now there's a lot more, but for the purposes of the time we have now, take this whole image, especially of your dad, and put it in the back of your mind, watching him running for the purpose, because money's needed for the family. It's done. It's what was the word that you used? It's dutiful. Mm-hmm. You know, you feel safe and secure. He's doing what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. Put that in the back of your mind. And now see yourself running for the purpose of making money. Keeping the image of dad in the back of your mind. And tell me how you're running.
For the purpose of making money, like we did the first time around, or because we need money for the family?
Let's try purpose first. Let's just try. I want to see it, because don't assume that you know one. Notice what you actually see. I just want to know what your mind is doing around this, so I don't make assumptions about where it'll go.
For the purpose of making money.
Yeah. So don't try to create it. Keep your father's image strongly in the back of your mind, and see yourself running in an open countryside for the purpose of making money. Just watch it and tell us what you actually see.
My God's honest reaction to this, yes, Wendy, which might be very telling about me, is I'm wondering what price I'm running for. Genuinely, when we say how much are we, I'm running for the purpose of money. I don't feel like I've layered this on top. I feel like this is an analysis of the image that came up when you said running for the purpose of money. The image of me running was sort of a slow jog, like I'm waiting to find out what I'm actually running for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think is that close to your experience of your working towards success? Is what am I really wanting for? Is that in there somewhere or not?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is there. There's in real life.
In real life, I'm asking you.
Yeah, in real life, I've got a very definite figure in mind for the type of lifestyle that would make me feel successful, that would be secure for my family and myself and my children.
Yes.
And when I'm engaging in any activity that feels like it's not taking me towards that goal in an expedient enough manner, it frustrates me, pisses me off. Would be a better description.
Okay.
Everything's got to that end. Everything's got a price on it. So, just recently, because this podcasting doesn't pay very well. Wendy,
yes, I know.
Don't get into podcasting, Jesus. So I've had to take on a couple of jobs, and they aren't paying me what I feel like I'm worth, and so there's a reluctance.
Yes.
It's creating a certain level of friction there.
Yes.
And that's me.
Okay. Now, I got something that if you can do this, I actually think it will be extremely of value for you. So let's try it. Now, that image of you running, like wondering what the prize is, why, is this worth it kind of thing, that image. Now see what's your son's name?
Roman.
Roman.
Yeah.
So look through Roman's eyes at you running for the purpose of making money, and tell me what Roman is seeing in the image. You're not deciding what he would think or see. You're looking through his little eyes at you running the way you're running, and just tell us what he sees and feels.
Okay, again, are we talking about the vague notion of making money?
No, not the vague notion. You're looking at the image. You're looking at the image of you that you just saw running, wondering what the prize is. Kind of a little.
Oh, still wondering what the prize is.
Well, that's the image that your mind gave you, and Roman is you're looking through his eyes and seeing you running that way. What does he see? What does he see in this image? You want to really stay in the image, not in what you think would happen. It'll give you more.
It's just me doing the same, but from a third person perspective.
No, go further. I'm really going to push you here, Danny. Look through his eyes. What does he see? What does he feel?
He's seeing
literally. What does he see through his 8-year-old eyes?
He's seeing his father being indecisive.
And now, as he sees his father being decisive, how does he feel? Keep looking through his eyes. Don't think about it. See you running in this way. What's the prize? Why am I running? And he sees indecisiveness. And how does that feel in the young 8-year-old body? Look through his eyes and you'll know.
I guess it's confusion and worry, anxiety a little bit.
Mm,
Yeah, that's all I'm getting from it.
that's a lot.
Okay.
Because when you remember, we're not talking about when you saw your father running because money's needed for the family, and he's got this.
Mhm.
It's dutiful. It's going to happen. And you felt safe and secure. And that felt really good. Now here, you're going what we call co-consciously into your son's consciousness of what he's seeing, something that you said a legacy you really don't want to give him. And what he's feeling is he's seeing indecisiveness, and he's feeling confusion, worry, and anxiety in that indecisiveness. Okay. Now, in the best of all possible worlds, you're feeling that as a father right now, because that'll make a difference. If you can really get this, it's you're in everything that I know, you are seeing some part of him right now, a real part of him. And I wanted you to have the experience of that so that you could think about it differently, so that you could know on a different level that what's happening to you is having an effect that you don't want it to. That's pretty harsh, but you asked me, so I'm doing it with you.
Yeah.
Let me add one more thing. Okay. Just like you felt so different when you saw your father running that way. First they were jogging and there was nothing, but when he got going, it made you feel safe and secure. So let me help you with that. Let's take another step, okay?
Okay.
One more step.
Yep.
So now put your father in the back of your mind, the way he's running, and see him, the image of him running because money's needed for the family. That whole way he's running, and really see it, and then put it in the back of your mind like a thought. And tell me when you got it, okay?
Yep.
And now see that you're running because money is needed for the family. But put most of your attention on your father image and some of your attention on yourself running because money's needed for the family. And now show us what you see.
Well, I'm outrunning my dad.
Oh, he's there too? Or just you are? You're outrunning him. Okay.
I've got this image of my dad, the same image from before in the back of my mind, and I'm seeing me because the family needs money.
Yeah.
The motivation totally changes, and I'll smash the world to pieces to make sure my kids are okay. And
show us what you're seeing. Show us what you're seeing.
It's just running. I need to run to get money. So I'm off. I'm Usain Bolt.
Okay. All right. Now see you look through Roman's eyes at you in this image. What does he see when he looks at this father? Look through his eyes. Don't guess. And see yourself running this way because money's needed for the family. What does he actually see?
What does he literally see visually or emotively?
Literally see. How are you running? And what does he see? And what does he feel when he sees it?
He sees me. I guess he's seeing me in the way I'd want to be seen, because he's seeing his dad. His dad, this big guy, this adult. I mean, I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'8", but compared to him,
yes, yes.
Yeah, big guy, like sort of strong, powerful, taking charge, dealing with the
Yes.
situation. It's again, it's similar to what we talked about before. It's a feeling of pride and safety, and Dad's got this, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Now, how do you feel seeing through his eyes? How does that feel to you, to see yourself through his eyes?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I quite like that
Mm.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's again, maybe we're probably stepping away from the experience a little bit here, but that is the image of me I would like him to have and carry forward into adulthood.
Of course you would.
Mm.
So let's talk about again, us being our own worst enemies. And I'm also noticing that we're going to need to stop relatively soon. So I want to make sure we cover all your questions. So what we see here as an example, and which you did so beautifully, is an example of a part of you that really can move differently about success, that has a different kind of inner energy, that has a different kind of more all-out feeling. Would you say that's correct? There's a more all-out feeling in this one than the other one where you're wondering about the prize, Danny?
Oh yeah, it's totally chalk and cheese, yeah.
Yes. So remember that, so you're seeing, in this one, you're seeing yourself without your history. You're literally seeing yourself with we used your, what in eidetic parlance, we used your father filter to pull out more of the energetic, more of the dutiful, committed, all out kind of, let's get this done, positive part of you that came out in him more in one of the images. And so we started to use that. And as you connected more to the part of you that was able to connect to the dad that has all that energy, the Leviathan, you were able to connect more to the Leviathan in you. You even noticed how big you looked in your son's eyes, which of course you are, right? But it was part of what you noticed.
Made a change to look like that as well, Wendy, I've got to say.
I didn't understand. Say it again.
I said it made a nice change to look that way as well. Like I say, 5'8". Nice to be big for a change.
Yes, and that's what happens. There is a sense of your bigness in the image. You got the sense of that, and then it feels good to you. Those are aspects of you that are starting to come up in the images. That's the work. The work, eidetically, is through the images to keep connecting more and more out of the head, out of the way we are committed to things being the way they have always been, out of the way of plain old history, and more into the resources. And when I work with my private clients or I work with my mastermind clients, that's the work we do. We work more opening up to what's underneath the history, what's underneath the mind that says, oh no, that can't happen. You know, my father couldn't run like that, or whatever but look what happened later. What other way the mind comes in and becomes our own worst enemy. This is a different part of the mind.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, just on the sort of a gut level reaction to the distinction between the phenomenological experience of that eidetic image versus me imagining something or remembering something, there's it's interesting. The first thing is there's an involuntary aspect to it, which isn't the same as in imagination, because with imagination it's almost you pre-construct the image
exactly
before you project it onto the mind, onto the imagination or whatever. There's I don't know, it's almost like if your mind sort of constructs the binary ones and zeros, the code that are gonna that make up the image before it becomes visual, but you're involved in that entire process.
Yes.
with the memory. That's it's a mixture, I guess, of voluntary and involuntary. It's a voluntary recalling, like
Mhm.
there's this image I'd like to recall, and then boom, there it is. So, but with that experience, it's there's an involuntary aspect to it. Another person is creating the images for you, um, which is interesting. I mean, I have experienced that before with things like guided visualizations. I guess what was different about it is with a guided visualization like the ones you download off iTunes or whatever, it's you're walking in a lovely countryside or through the trees or whatever, and you go past a river, and as well as being sort of, I don't know, a bit generic, those images, in a general sense, their visualization is all about nature and things like that. There's nothing personal to it, whereas with that
Mhm.
image, it's strange to have this involuntary aspect of family members and being thrust in there involuntarily, and
Mhm.
there's a personal aspect to it. It's quite interesting. I have to say there were certain parts of it that so this idea of running. So again, I don't know if this is the running has got a symbolic meaning to it, a symbolic aspect to it, but running is something that's sort of alien to my family in the sense
Mhm.
that I mean, I don't really, apart from it, I think I remember my dad chasing the dog about a few times or whatever, but like, because it's nicked his slippers or whatever. But, like the image of my dad running through a field, it's not one that ever happened.
Yes. Yes.
And my mum, I don't think I've ever seen her run in my life, not even for a
Yes.
bus. And
Yes.
so I wonder if, would it be more conducive to the process to find aspects that are more familiar to the person, or does that
Yeah.
not matter?
Well, because we're not working with your parents, we're
Right,
working with your deeper consciousness,
right,
and we're working with how you use energy and how you're able to take in or not take in support, and what happens when support is offered. Like I asked you about your mom and dad, if she needed help. We didn't really keep going with that, but it was a little tangential. We're looking at the pace, and like, for example, when I first saw my running image, the running for the purpose of making money, my very first one, my dad was kind of running over here and looking at the flowers, and then running over there and looking at the
right.
flowers. And he was having a wonderful time, but he was not getting anywhere. And that is exactly what was happening to me. I was being exactly like him, and it was driving me nuts. And my mother was, I don't remember my visual of her, but for that first image, but she was in life very grim in terms of her effectiveness. It was much more tight. And I seemed to be between running off to the flowers or being tight, and neither one was working for me. So nothing was happening for me in my own success. I used these images that we were using today to really help me stop being my own worst enemy, either running after the flowers and or being tight. Those were my options. That's all that not in my head, I knew better than that, but that was all I could find myself doing.
Right. So
Right.
these visualizations, are they taken from sort of a set of sort of predetermined visualizations that are a sort of standard practice in eidetic imagery?
Okay. So I wouldn't ever call them visualizations. They're definitely eidetics for
Yeah.
the reason that you said, for the exact reason you said. There are some that start with an opening line, like see your parents running. But then from there, what happens is totally unique to the person. And then there are some that come from with deep within the person. So, for example, I have a client who likes to be in her own world. And it feels much better kind of in her own world. She's actually very successful. And in one of the images that she saw, her father actually, she's in her own world and her father's reading his paper, and they're completely separate. And she's being very active with her imagination on the floor playing. But he puts down his paper and he starts very slow. This is nothing I told her to do. This is what her consciousness is showing her. He starts very, very slowly paying attention to her, interacting with her a little bit, just enough that she can let him in, and just enough though he's not interfering with her creativity and her play. And what's happened is, as she keeps doing this, her ability to connect with other people, to open herself up while still being herself, is vastly different, because the image is opening up that part of her as she's watching it. It's dealing with the pieces of her that block things. So that came completely from her own mind. So there are thousands of images that we can start, like you and I did today. We did about 4 maybe, or images that come from the person's mind, or a combination of both. It depends on what the person needs and where they're going. Can I give people a way to have more of a personal experience and say just a word to people about what they might have experienced, so we don't leave them hanging? Yeah. So for most, when it's not possible for me to go over in the little bit of time we have what might have happened for you while Danny was doing his image, if you were doing your images, I was really gearing this exactly to you, Danny, today, to what you had asked me for, not to what anybody else might need on the podcast. So if you want to have more of your own personal experience on an even more basic level of what's stopping you in how you're being your own worst enemy, then I have written, as Danny, as you alluded to before, a spiritual manifesto. But what I mean by that is, a lot of people want to do meditation and they want to do spiritual practices, even journaling, if that's part of the spiritual practice. But the way people feel during the practice and the way they feel in the rest of their life, there's too big of a gap. So there's a lot of peace in the meditation and then too much craziness or harriedness in the rest of life. So what Eidetics addresses that. That's my personal interest, is helping people really bring what the calmness and the presence and the expansion from spiritual practice into the rest of life, because that is what Eidetics can do in a very practical, evidence-based way. And so you can download the Spiritual Manifesto for free. It'll walk you through how to bridge the gap. There are stories in there about how people are their own worst enemies and how we've worked with it. And there's a way to have an eidetic experience for yourself. And you can get it at myspiritualmanifesto.com.
Okay, well, I will, as always, I'll include that in the show notes. We are coming up on 2 hours, so I think we're going to have to pass on the quickfire questions, unfortunately. But I have to say, there's some questions remain for me, Wendy. I'm wondering whether the meaning that comes out of these experiences is whether there's meaning inherent that's there to be sort of unearthed from the eidetic experience, or whether we just ascribe meaning after the fact.
Great question.
Yeah.
Can I address that?
Oh, you kind of thought if we were signing off, but if you'd like to address that, I'd be interested to know the answer. Yeah.
It's a great question, because all the images, like I said in the beginning, they contain the image and lots of feelings and sensations and layers and levels of meaning. So there are many meanings. And if you go straight to meaning, you will lose all the other layers of meaning that can come later by spending more time with the image. So they all have meaning, but the purpose of an eidetic image isn't just to get to meaning. The purpose of an eidetic image in my book is for you to start to experience yourself being different. So yes, there's meaning, but don't stop at meaning. You stay with the image. Really let yourself experience it. Let yourself see yourself through Roman's eyes when he's seeing you this way. Really let yourself experience it both ways, actually, because there are layers of meaning there, many layers of meaning, but don't stop there, because what often happens in the mind is that we get a meaning. It's like knowing the name of a blue jay. Oh, there's a blue jay. I'm not going to look at it anymore because I know the name. You don't want to stop the mind there. You want to look at the colors of the blue jay and look at the way that he flies and notice how he feeds the babies or whatever it is. You want to stay present with the experience and not cut it off by putting a label on it and then storing it away, because then you lose so much of the value that's there for you. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I'm curious to what people could glean from the experience, what they could learn about themselves from it, particularly how those kind of experiences are going to relate to things like depression and anxiety, how it's going to stack up against something like the gold standard CBT, and particularly with when you take these experiences into the real world, the reason people are depressed and anxious is because of the life circumstances, socioeconomic conditions, disease, death, all the other horrible things that we face, and whether it's enough to just engage in exercises like that to deal with those, whether these or whether they're just a sort of helpful addendum to dealing with more material, visceral, real world issues. What I will say about it is it was definitely an interesting imaginative exercise, an emotional exercise as well. And I don't know whether that's unique to the experience of eidetic imagery, or whether that was just, like I say, this idea of straddling of walking the tightrope between an imaginative experience that someone else is controlling.
But Danny, you have to really take in that I wasn't controlling your image. I was giving you questions.
No, that's true. That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And I also, let me just please add that people that come to me for real life issues, and they expect and they deserve to have a difference, for it to make a difference. You don't know me, so there's no way for you to judge the truth of this, but I would never do this work if it didn't create the kind of absolutely palpable, discernible, observable change that people are looking for, because in my mind, why bother if it doesn't? Mm-hmm. So we are talking very real world. There's people that I've worked with that didn't even tell me, but they got off antidepressants while we were working. I wasn't trying to get them off antidepressants, but they felt so much better that they weaned themselves off correctly, but weaned themselves off on their own. I wouldn't bother doing this work if it didn't make a difference. Why would I?
Mm. Yeah, like I say, Wendy, it's just, with me and my crowd, I'm very much about sort of show me the evidence and the studies and the stats, and with this practice in particular, there's no research on it. I mean, if you go on PubMed, there's been no studies on it. It doesn't seem to have appeared in any of the journals. But like I say, just from any experience that's got a uniqueness to it, and that I will, regardless of whether there's science and evidence or whatever to back this up. Just for me personally, all the different sort of therapies I've sat through, that was a unique experience. Mm-hmm. And so to that extent, it's worth experimenting with, and for individuals, but it's also, I'd say it was worth looking into at a more scientific level, especially because, according to the literature, the eidetic experience is a unique phenomenological category. It is something empirical to be studied, and so I'd be interested to see things like that. But of course, it's not available at the moment, and it's not something we can do in the course of a podcast.
Yes,
but like
I'd love that too. That would be great, Danny. I'd love to see the research.
But yeah, in the meantime, Wendy, it was an interesting experience. It was. I'm glad it was nice to, like I say, do the interview a bit sort of, without the research and come to it completely new, and just let you take the reins and guide me through it. It was definitely a unique experience, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. It was fun. I say anything that takes my mind in a place it's not been before is a worthwhile experience. I think it's that for everybody. So
that's so important. I love that. I love that you felt that you had that experience.
So Wendy, just before I let you go now, I know you've mentioned the Spiritual Manifesto. Is there any other links or any books or anything you'd like to direct the viewers, the listeners towards?
That is the best place to start.
Okay.
myspiritualmanifesto.com. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, like I say, I'll include that in the show notes, and it should be going along the bottom of the screen round about now. In the meantime, Wendy Yellen, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me and for asking such penetrating questions.
Thank you.